Can I switch seats to sit with my wife? So this happened a few months ago, but I just found this subreddit today and it applies so well. I get kinda anxious when I fly and for that reason like to have an aisle seat and will always get one on my own through the seat map when I book. I always fly basically cross-country for reference minimum 4-hour flights anyways. I'm in my aisle seat and the middle seat is still open with a few passengers still boarding the plane. I see a typical airport creature looking dude who's like 65 and some woman also around his age, walking together and he motions that he's in the middle seat. I get up and before I can sit down he goes, "Do you think you'd be willing to trade seats with my wife so she could sit next to me?" Now I've grown up traveling with my family and my dad travels for work, so he always stressed the unspoken rules of airline travel and importance of following them, i.e. always have your shoes and belt off at TSA. That sort of thing. So the whole "can I pretty please switch seats because I'm a moron or cheap and didn't want to book them together" pisses me off, and as I mentioned I already don't like travel. So I shut him down immediately when the words come out of his mouth. I'm just like I'm sitting in the seat I was assigned. He looks all sad and spends the first 20 minutes of the plane ride talking to his wife behind me while I have headphones in. Mind you, I never caught what seat his wife was in, but I assumed she had the aisle behind me because why the hell else would he ask? After a while, I have an epiphany where I'm like, you know what? I'll be the extra nice guy today and take my headphones out and get the guy's attention. I ask him, "Is your wife also in the aisle seat?" And he starts aggressively smiling like a kid who got his hand caught in the cookie jar and goes, "No, she's in the middle seat." I shook my head in disgust and ignored him the rest of the flight. TLDR entitled "Grandpa Doesn't Book Seats Next to Wife." Ask me to switch my aisle seat to a middle seat on a cross-country flight without telling me it's a middle seat. Then laughs in my face when I realize the scam he tried to pull. Another unwritten rule of air travel is if you're going to ask to someone to switch seats, you need to offer them a seat that is as good as what they have, or something better. If the person has paid to choose their seat, be prepared to offer them what they paid if you expect them to switch. I, too, like the aisle seat, and especially if I've had to pay for it. I am not going to give it up unless I'm getting a better offer or getting paid. I many years ago used to fly with young son from ages 2-9 to visit family OS. He was always a brilliant flyer BTW. He loved it. My travel agent cousin always booked the spot where there were 2 seats to themselves. That way he could lean on me, spread out a bit, have toys and bother no one. The amount of times couples would try to make me change because they wanted to snuggle. Or he shouldn't have a window, blah blah. So yay, entitled people were doing this 30 years ago. I am never, ever giving up my aisle seat. Airplane seating is such a lottery who you get sat next to. I hate flying, so I pick my seat carefully ahead of time. Always an aisle up the back because seats generally fill from the front back, so the odds of an empty seat are much higher in the middle up the back. No one wants the middle seat. So sick of people who get middle seats and expect others to trade off a better seat so they can sit together. I have found if you want a quiet flight and left alone, when asked to switch, reply with, "Sorry, but my probation officer mandates I sit in my assigned seat." Had a woman with a 5-year-old ask if I'd switch my window seat for the kid's aisle seat because the kid likes to look out the window. I looked down at the kid and said very gently that I paid extra for the seat because I like to look out the window too, so no, I'm sorry. I don't fly very often. The kid said okay and didn't even care, but the mom gave me a disgusted face and told her kid, "Sorry that some people aren't very nice." What? I paid for that seat. Sorry that I don't shit money and want what I paid for. I once gave up a window seat for a middle so a dad could sit with his kid. Then he had his kid recline into me. Still grates me to this day. Middle seats, that is a big no for me. Prefer the aisle but will take a window seat if aisle isn't available. My first time on a plane I paid for a window seat. Got on the plane and there is an old woman in my seat, deadpan face. Normally, I just avoid confrontation, but I thought about it and decided I was taking my seat. They looked disappointed but thankfully they just moved. Choosing a seat is like $5. Why would you ever get on a plane with your spouse and not pay $10 to get your seats? Your poor planning does not constitute an emergency for me. You'll see each other when you land. Stewie Griffin. I'm 6 feet 8. I pick my seats based on being able to physically fit and shift about as. Unsurprisingly, I don't want DVTs. If the seat you want to swap doesn't offer this, then we ain't ever swapping. I always pay to book a specific seat I need because of anxiety. I don't fly often, but I learned that lesson after the first time I flew, and was miserable. I will cough up the extra cost. I will not move seats for anyone. Because I coughed up the extra cost, tongue out. I'd never change seats with anyone. Because if the plane crashes and they find my charred, unrecognizable body buckled in a seat, they'd look at the seating plan whose body it is. And I don't want to be buried under somebody else's name. My husband, a 6 tall guy, traveled for a living. He was sitting on the aisle in an exit row on a short hop SFO to PDX, and an older couple got on the plane. The man was seated next to him in the middle seat of the exit row and his wife was a few rows back. In a middle seat. The wife came up to the exit row and the husband then asked my spouse if he wouldn't mind giving up his seat so they could sit together. My husband asked how long they had been married. The man proudly replied 41 years. My husband told them, "Then I am sure you can handle being apart for 1 hour and 45 minutes. That happened to me recently, and after I moved to a front aisle seat we were allowed to move due to stop no plane change. I said no. But one of you can have the middle. They said no and moved on. The lady was nice. The man gave me a dirty look. I was like, whatever, tears of joy. It was an hour flight. They could be separated for 1 hour, especially if they both wanted aisle seats. Once my ex and I were flying home from New York to Los Angeles. Since my ticket was purchased a week before the trip, it was more expensive and wound up in seat 1A. On the return, my ex decided to upgrade and was next to me. A woman with a small kid in coach had the nerve to ask if we could trade. Flat out said nope. The look on her face was priceless. I don't care who you are. I don't ever trade seats. And if someone is in my seat, which happens all the time for some reason, I just tell them they're in my seat. Might want to crosspost to our stolen seats. I always pick aisle for my husband. And middle or window, depending on plane size for me. He likes the aisle. And I get super anxious about flying. So I make sure we sit together. I gave up my aisle seat for a middle seat on a short flight last year so that a young couple could sit together with their 2-year-old. Typically I would have said no, but it was one 2-hour flight and I could see how stressed they were. They were very appreciative and their darling 2-year-old thanked me in French. Must have received some good karma that day because my upgrade to business class came through on my long flight. I am worried that I will be the villain in a story shortly. Traveling from Australia to the US in September. Booked a few months ago. Booked on American Airlines but plane operated by Qantas. For some reason it was a $1,000 cheaper to book on AITA rather than Qantas. But I cannot select a seat for my wife and I. Called Qantas and they say cannot be done, but just show up to check in and it should be good as they know that there are 2 people traveling together. Let's see how that goes. I would never switch after sitting down. Anybody who is entitled enough to ask will get a stern no sorry. I wouldn't be swapping that seat either. If you don't care enough to pay to book it, then you don't get it. Simple as that. I pay for the exit row window seat for a reason. I always book window. My hubby books aisle. We pay to book our preferred seats. We don't need to sit together for a plane ride. We're not conjoined twins. And we're not giving up our seats because somebody was too cheap to book the seats they want. And I'm not closing the window shade either. I paid to gaze out that window. It relaxes me. I don't mind switching if it's to the same seat or better, but I'm not going middle from aisle window. Johannesburg to Munich. 11 hours in the air. I booked very early Christmas with family. So the front seat was available. Front as in the next obstacle is 4 feet away from my legs. It cost me about €150. But I book it. Boarding time comes. Guy behind me, hey. I noticed you're not very tall. But I am. It's very uncomfortable for me. Would you switch seats? I offered to do it if he paid cash. He turned away mumbling some people are just. Anyway, I leaned back all the way for the whole 11 hours. I once had to ask John Cena WWE to move from my assigned seat. He was super nice about it, but I did think twice about asking. I always pay extra to sit where I sit, and the last time I just had surgery. Lady got mad I wouldn't switch. I told her I paid extra for the seat and I was in pain from surgery. I couldn't risk getting jostled. But I'm a heartless bitch. I said better a heartless bitch than a cheap bitch. The answer is still no, and now fuck off. On the other hand, airlines love to separate families unless they pay extra for the privilege of sitting together. Ah, you have a 4-year-old with you. Better pay us an extra $50 or you are all going to be 10 rows apart from each other, even if it's 4 months ahead. I think the feds crack down on that. But I'm not sure how hard. I board early, slap on my headphones, and close my eyes so nobody bothers me. I travel solo, so I get this request a lot. I've become very assertive when dealing with these people because they often bring the flight attendant or their partner with them, and it's 2 against 1. Yeah, this doesn't happen in house cuz most of the time, if you book a flight together, they will seat you together most of the time. They specifically say over the speaker to not switch seats and only sprawl out into another row once the plane is in the air and there's plenty space. Same or better is definitely the rule. I book early so that I always have an aisle seat. But I fly weekly. People cannot always control the seat they are given. If they missed their previous connection, they get what they get when they get on the next flight. BTDT. I do agree that you don't ask someone to switch unless you have an equal or better seat to offer them. They're grown-ass adults. They can spend a few hours in different rows. I find it odd that they tried to talk between the rows. I can barely hear the person right next to me on a noisy flight. I'm definitely not going to be able to hear the person behind me. I begrudgingly gave up my pre-booked aisle seat to a woman who was visibly pregnant and took her middle spot for a night flight. I must have woken her up and asked her to move about 5 times getting up to the loo. There's a reason I pre-book. My husband booked our flights on a recent trip and we got notice the day before our seats changed. So now me, my 2.5-year-old and husband would all be in different rows spread out across the plane. I had nothing to barter with. And am so thankful a woman swapped for a lesser seat so I could be with my little girl. No way I wasn't going to be with her. Husband kept his seat. I think it's always worth asking. My husband and I often book seats together and then get moved. In fact, pretty much most the time we get moved. Even if we pay. Sometimes it's fixed and sometimes we are told to ask the person next to us. We ask and if they say no, it's fine. I wouldn't say they are entitled for asking. Just for being annoyed you said no. I always try to get assigned seats ahead of time, however sometimes it doesn't work out. Honestly, what's the big deal if you aren't together? I have done trips with the wife and my 2 teens where we are all over the place. Who cares? I just do my best to avoid the middle seat, but again, who cares? I put my AirPods in and play on my phone. What was entitled about their asking? Like, they simply asked and didn't press anything afterwards. You're the one who reconsidered. They seemed bummed, but fine. OFC, it's your seat. You have the right to say yes or no regardless of the wife having an aisle sit, and nobody should shame you for it, which doesn't sound like they did, but no need to act like there's a villain in this story, lol. There's something about the motion of a taxiing plane that gives me motion sickness unless I'm sitting in the window seat and able to open it enough to view the ground outside. I'm fine once we're in the air, but I will be sick if I can't see outside. So 2 things I absolutely refuse to do. Even with an offer of an upgrade to first class, close my window shade prior to takeoff and or give up my window seat that I paid for and booked well in advance for this specific reason. $5? Where do you get this deal? We pay minimum $25 per person per flight to pick seats so we can sit as a family. Once when I was a kid, I was sitting in a window seat and someone asked if I could change seats, and I said I wasn't allowed to talk to strangers. Lol, the look on their face was priceless, and I put my headphones back on, then looked out the plane's window. Had aisle theater tickets with a great view. The woman next to me asked if she and her friend could switch with us because she had acute anxiety attacks if she felt trapped, and this would happen in the middle of the program. She was sure my husband, who's very empathetic, was getting ready to switch. I said no. The woman started what I thought at the time was her routine tears. Heavy breathing interspersed with moans and repeated "I can't breathe" statements. Paramedics escorted them out before the show. It was a good show. Still don't feel bad. Never switch seats. I sit in the seat I paid for. They need to sit in the seat they paid for. Often the real reason for the switch is they don't want to sit next to someone that stinks, picks their nose, or weighs 700 pounds. Of course, they'll never bring that part up when they plead with you to switch. I'll say it again. Never switch seats. If you do, there's about a 95% chance you'll wish you hadn't. I always get the window seat or I get motion sick. Many flights I've been on, some parent asks me to switch with their child so they can see out the window. I always politely say no. Only once have I had to resort to saying not unless you want me to vomit on you. I sit in the seat I paid for. Stewie Griffin, ma'am, your poor planning doesn't constitute an emergency. You will see your husband in Paris. This annoys me to no end. Thankfully, I haven't had this happen to me, but the fact that we now have the ability to choose the seats we want when we book our tickets should be enough to stop this kind of thing. You'd think, but nope. You still see entitlement because some people are too cheap to pay full price for both tickets but still expect someone else to accommodate them. Stick to your boundaries, people. You paid for your seat. You have a right to keep your seat. Do not let someone else bully or guilting you into giving up what you've paid for. If they don't like it, tell them next time to pay for both seats. I was under the impression that it was illegal, well, against international aviation laws, to swap seats if you have an assigned seat. As in the event of a crash, they can more easily identify the bodies. Edit just found out it's to stop the plane crashing on takeoff or landing. If you swap around, the plane becomes unbalanced weight-wise and may become less stable and more prone to crashing. Years ago I took an international flight with my 3 kids. The youngest was 3. Due to delays and changes, we all 4 were seated separately. This was fine for the 8 and 10-year-old. I asked to trade seats with the man seated next to my 3-year-old and he declined. Fine. We are all going to the same place. She will be fine. An hour into the flight, he comes to say he is happy to trade seats with me. To which I reply, no worries. I think we will be okay at this point. I enjoyed the next 9 hours of child-free travel while he got to sit next to a 3-year-old chatterbox who occasionally spilled things. Lol, why'd you say no immediately when you thought she just had the aisle seat behind you? Not the asshole, they should book seats together. OMG, the entitlement of some people. I don't really see the entitlement. Sounds like he asked politely and accepted your answer when you declined. I never understood why people need to sit next to each other on a plane. How long was he married to his wife for? 5 minutes? Same thing with kids. Why does the kid need to sit with his parent? Are you afraid he is going to get kidnapped mid-flight while we are thousands of feet in the air? If you got by without your wife during your childhood, you can get by without your wife for the duration of the flight. She will be at the gate when you get off. I promise. The plane isn't going to magically fly away the second your wife gets off the plane 10 seconds before you. Probably an unpopular response. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with him asking. Also nothing wrong with you saying no. For whatever reason. No need for either of you to be dicks about it. Asking for a seat change doesn't seem that entitled to me. Pitching a fit if refused, especially if it involves a worse seat, would definitely be entitled. Though, there are all kinds of reasons why people traveling together might have been split up. We're all humans. It shouldn't hurt to ask. DAND. I mean, whatever. You said no. If you'd said maybe, then you would have seen which sat you were being asked to move to. Husband and wife didn't even get annoyed or annoying. Not really entitled at all. This is boring. Good for you. He asked. You said no. All fine. Now you are whining like an entitled baby whose feelings were hurt by the request. Grow up. Op is a real entitled asshole. It's one thing to not want a middle seat, but OP was ready to not move back one seat to still have the aisle. Great a prick. Dude doesn't really sound entitled. I mean, he asked you nicely and didn't demand or throw a fit. You did a lot of assuming and come off as a bit of an asshole. I don't know. Sometimes people have legitimate reasons to change, but they should just ask at the gate for help. From staff. Staff can ask around. People can say no or yes. It's not a big deal. The only time this happened, I went to the left aisle seat to the middle aisle seat. I couldn't get out of my seat fast enough. Tell him you chose the aisle seat because of a small bladder or afraid you might have diarrhea. And may have to get up multiple times for the bathroom. It's fine to ask politely if someone will switch seats. It's not fine to pitch a fit if they say no. Many times it's the airline's fault that people can't book their seats together. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to book a flight and there are single seats galore, but no groups of 2-3 seats together in any class of service at any price. Not all of those taken seats are actually booked. They're reserved for travel agents or other programs. It's infuriating. My thought on this is, you don't know when or why they booked the flight the way they did. Maybe it was a last-minute booking for some reason and there were no longer seats together. You have every right not to swap. But to assume they were cheap and didn't book seats together isn't cool. I just want to say I travel a lot. My kids 10, 7, 4 and often book some tickets with miles and some credit card. Because of this they often don't sit us together and won't fix it despite me asking them to. Repeatedly. So not everyone that asks for a swap is trying to be cheap. I always respect the answer of no and offer the best seats to give away. He asked. You said no. Stop feeling guilty. Unless it is for an equal or better seat, I am not moving. How does simply asking to switch seats make someone entitled? I don't travel at all. But to me, a seat is a seat. What difference does it make? I've occasionally seen someone start to ask my spouse for their aisle seat and then change their mind when they see me. Because I am kind of fat. Since airplane seats have gotten narrower and narrower, 19 inches wide when I first flew. Now only 17 inches. You have to be willing to be pretty cozy with the person in the middle seat. LMFAOROFLMAO. That annoys me. It hasn't happened to me because when I travel, it's always with the family and we are 5 people, so we pretty much take up a whole aisle. When booking with United, for example, we always book economy because you get to choose the seat you want. I don't want my kids traveling alone. Yay, the basic economy is sometimes way cheaper, but why run the risk of not being seated together? I would never ask to switch because I know people pay, like me, to pick their seats. My rule for swapping seats is same or better.